As I said earlier, we are all called here. A place in us has brought us all together because we do have work to do. When we look out at the world with our human eyes, we see opposition, chaos, unpredictability, fighting, arguing. We've been through it all before, but we see it, and it takes a hold of us. But when we live from the inside out and start looking at the community we've built, the common unity that we've built by knowing, right here, we all know we come from one human family, and we're way more alike than we are different. So today we're going to talk about community and how we allow our community, our common unity, to let us take a vision together. Do you know the power it is when people can vision something together? It's powerful when we vision it on our own, but when we can vision it together, it starts taking a bigger energy, a spiritual atmosphere of a place where everyone belongs. Let's just take a minute for that. Because behind everything, thank God we're all individuals. Thank God we're all unique, or how boring this world would be. But there's a common thread that unites us all. I want to share with you a quote from Hildegard of Bingen. Now, Hildegard is a 12th century German Catholic mystic. Amazing woman. I have a book on her. She's absolutely amazing. And she said, God has arranged all things in the world. God has arranged all things in the world in consideration of everything else. All things in consideration of everything else. Everything that is in the heavens, on earth, and under the earth is permeated with connectedness and relatedness. Now, our job as a community of InSpirit and a community of the human race, is to be care-stitching the threads of connectedness back together. That's our job. We've got to be sewing these things back together. There's a Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam. Oh, I hope I say that way. Tikkun is repair, and olam is the world. It sounds like a big task, but that's our job. Remember what Mother Teresa said, we aren't here to do great things. We are here to do small things with great love. And Dave mentioned the power of love is just the most powerful power there is. There was a woman, an elderly woman, sitting on a bench knitting. And she was knitting with a certainty that came from years and years and years of practice. And when someone came up to her and said, "What are you making?" She smiled and she said, "I'm repairing the cold." She was making scarves for people she didn't know. She was giving her gift to people who might be cold, and there's a lot of people that might be cold right now in our country. Ooh, I'm glad I'm in California. But yes, this is community. This is community when you don't just want good for yourself. You want good for all. And that's what our prayers are to evolve into. We don't start that way, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But we evolve, so we want the good for ourselves and the good for all. Nature, and I'm sure everyone has a story of nature, how you see nature working together for good and teaching us lessons. But the aspen grove, the trees in an aspen grove all grow above the surface in unique, beautiful expressions of themselves. They're all unique and special and different, yet underground they have an interconnected root system. And in that aspen grove, if any one of the trees gets sick, gets ill, or dies, under the surface the nutrients come together from all the roots and send nutrients to that place in their grove to nurture the land, either nurture the tree or create a place for a new one to grow, just like our immune cells go to places in us. When we have something ill or dysfunction or needs extra help, our immune cells work together. And that's what community does. Working together in compassion and love and healing and acceptance and patience and not rushing. All of that, we work together for that same good. And it's time we learn that lesson of the Aspen wisdom. Now, Hafez has a wonderful message for us. Hafez, the 14th century Sufi mystic. And he says, yes, we have all come together to the right place. We sit in God's classroom, as I said this morning. Now, the only thing left for us to do, my dear, is to stop throwing spitballs for a while. Crazy, crazy, crazy. We need to stop throwing spitballs for a while. You know, undisciplined people create disharmony. We need to learn the discipline of making better choices, where we don't throw the spitball, and I'll give you some other choices later. But Ernest Holmes talks about, there's really two places, two destinations for it, ultimate destinations for us. One is love, and one is fear. Now, when humans first met each other, the fearful ones would see someone and say, oh, you're different, go away. But the people that came from love and faith and knowing the connection of all life would say, you're different. Come and teach me what I do not know. Come and teach me what I do not know. You know, we are on a journey of awakening to that place where we can, what the Dalai Lama said, hi Dalai Lama, we need to move from I to we. But I'd have to expound on that a little bit. I don't think we move from I to we. Here's I, here's we. I think we move to we by bringing the I with us. We start out as pretty self-focused individuals because we're learning who we are. We're learning what our gifts, our strengths, our talents are, and we do it by comparison. So when that statement, what's in this for me, that's not a bad thing. We need to know what's in it for us, because that's how we learn what we like and what we don't like, who we are and what we aren't, all of that. But we're at a place of an expanding, an evolutionary, oh, that was slow, I didn't rush that one, evolutionary spiral upward. The universe, our consciousness, everything is always bending towards unity, bending upward. We need to be part of it. But we're growing and evolving, so as we learn the I, who we are, we can step into we. But it's a choice we need to make. Ernest Holmes has a page 373 in his Living the Science of Mind, where he says, we must find a faith, a love, a faith, that's greater than our fears of people, conditions, life, or death. We need to find a faith bigger than that. Fear and inferiority complexes are always, always a turning of thought back upon yourself. Fear, insecurity, inferiority is when we're closed inside ourselves and not realizing there's something so much greater at work. There's greater possibility at work all the time. Divine possibility, divine potential, creativity always at work. And he goes on to say this self-centeredness must be healed. We need to find our I, but don't live consumed by the I, or we'll get so inward focused, we'll be filled with fear and isolation and loneliness. And do you know that in the world right now, that's an epidemic of loneliness, isolation, because thoughts have turned back. People have turned back on themselves instead of realizing there's so much more. And we do that by realizing, yes, we have the small self with a lowercase s, but we are part of a big self, the God essence and energy, whatever we call that, the divine, the infinite intelligence, whatever you call that. We're part of something so much bigger. It's like in Hindu, they have the Indra's net. That's this big net that's all the threads that are connected. And at each point of the thread, there's a jewel, and that's us. The jewel are the expressions of the one, the God energy, that essence, that expression. And so when we find that and melt into that, open our minds, open our hearts, we just heard that, and open up to something greater, we can find something so much more. The beautiful Episcopal priest, Matthew Fox, who was once a Catholic priest, but he was defrocked because for 12 years he had a fight with the Catholic Church because he said, we are not born from original sin. We are born as original blessing. They didn't like that so well. They didn't like that. We love it. That we are born as an original blessing. And that's what we're here to unfold and share and know. That's why we're here. And he has a feeling about this separation and self-centeredness, and that we have to get beyond that also. Well, you know, in the old English and European times, they would use nursery rhymes to talk about their social and political and power woes. And so they'd be able to sing these little nursery rhymes and actually be talking about what's all around them. So he talks about Humpty Dumpty. And he says, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Well, what does that mean? Well, the wall, now, I don't know. Humpty is an egg person. I don't know how he climbed a wall. But anyway, he climbed the wall of dualism. Dualism. And he sat up there. So, you know, when you think dualistic thoughts, you can feel better than a lot of other people. And he sat up there. But you don't last very long, so boom, he took a fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together again because they didn't ask the women to come. They didn't ask the healers, the nurturers, the moms. They just told the men to go fix it. Now they could, anyway, you know, come on, you guys. We need each other, okay? But he said, you know, we've got to really realize when we're sitting on those walls keep us separated. You know, keep us separated. We've got to realize, you know, we're in this together. We're in this process of life together. And his comment on this, as he refers to the Bible, and he talks about Jacob's ladder. And Jacob's ladder in the Bible is Jacob had a dream, and he saw a big stairway that was going from earth to heaven. And he thought, oh, that's a long climb for me to get from here to God. But I guess I'm going to have to do it. And so Matthew Fox talks about ladders as being very isolating and hard and the journey to God, and we got to go and, you know, get there and exhausting. Well, I think we need ladders to develop our strength. You know, we need to do that. We've got to find out how strong we are. The thing is, once you find God, once you find that, if that's the route you choose, you've got to come back down the ladder and bring all that with you. So he said that's one way to do it, but the other way to do it, and he again talks about biblical story, is Sarah's circle. Sarah was a matriarch in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. She was a beautiful, physically beautiful woman who was known for her faith and her patience with God and life. And she wanted a child so bad. And she couldn't have one. And there's a whole story in the Bible about that I'm not getting into. But at 90, she was barren. And at 90 years old, God came to her and said, Sarah, you're going to have a son. I mean, her human self saw the limitation of that and started laughing, right? But there was a divine possibility at work. And so she joyfully acknowledged that, you know, laughed, and she had a child. How often do we put a period because we don't get things in our time where God has placed a comma? And her lesson to that is when you're in the joy of life, when you're involved in life, in community, in the circle, and you're living and put up with the good and the bad and the suffering and pain and joy and pleasure and all that, and you laugh and sing and cry, and you're involved in it all, you make yourself open and available. It's not the effort, it's the willingness and the readiness to receive the gift. And that was her message. And Matthew Fox goes on to talk about the importance of circles, which I would call a community. Circles are different than ladders when you climb by yourself. Circles, you dance side by side, circle side by side, sing side by side. Do you know what it's like as we look around that circle at the end of our service? It feels really good. We don't look at the differences. We look at the unity, and we're together. And in the ladder, God's up there, separate, but in the circle, Spirit, the divine, is right in the middle, equally there for each and every one of us. It's not separating, it's uniting. So the question for me would be, I want to be in the circle. I like the circle. How do we get to the place that we harmonize ourselves to be in tune with the infinite, that our smaller self can be in tune with the greater self? Well, I have 3 things I've chosen for that. Number 1 is the work of love. Absolutely. Mark Nepo writes, the work of love is to stay present when the urge is to withdraw. So even if you have some of that withdrawal, you have the courage when you love yourself enough and love life enough to get involved. I would like to adapt I'd like to expand, not adapt. Hafez's quote on we need to stop throwing spitballs for a while. I think we need to start sending love notes. And love notes can be sent on a piece of paper. They can be sent in a smile. They can be sent in a word. They can be sent in a hand touch. I sat next to a woman at PT this week. I've got a little shoulder thing going on, and she's just cranky. And I really didn't want to sit by her, but every other seat was taken. So I sat down and I thought, I hope I don't catch that crankiness. I thought, maybe I could help the crankiness. So I thought, okay, what would you? And I looked and she had these really flowery workout pants on. I said, your pants make me happy. And she looked at me and she said, they make me happy too. And I said, oh, cool, do you wear them every day? And she said, almost. I said, well, cool. Maybe we could give out pair to everybody in the world. And the energy switched immediately. So the love note was her flowery pants. And it was such a perfect thing. It made everybody happy. You could feel it in the room. It was really perfect. The next thing, so the power of love, to be sending love notes with our thoughts, our actions, our words, our deeds, our whatever it is the power of listening. Communities connect through the power of listening. When you can say, your experience matters enough to me that I can pause my own and listen to you. That's what we do in community. We care enough about someone else that we can do that. Mark Nepo said, listening is leaning into the life of another without needing to shape it. We're not here to change other people. We're here to expand ourselves. So that's what it's about, expanding ourselves into something more. What if we entered into every conversation, well, maybe not every conversation, but many conversations, about how can I be changed? How can I be expanded? What can I learn from this interaction together? What can I know? So you make yourself available. That's the power of listening. And the last one is having the courage to stay. Things get uncomfortable. Life is uncomfortable a lot. That's part of the growth process. It's part of why we're here. But staying when there's strain, staying when there's difficulty. And the work of love, as I said, is the courage, the willingness to stay when the urge is to withdraw. Now, this does not mean tolerating harm at all. Repeat, this does not mean tolerating harm. It's meaning learning to connect. And think about porcupines. When it's cold, they want to stick together to get warm. But if they're too close, what happens? Ouch! It's not comfortable. So then they run away, and then they get cold again. And then they have to come back together until they learn the perfect space, the balance it takes to keep each other warm and not go too far. Does that remind you of any relationships? We need to learn how to work with each other. We learn to need to have our boundaries and say, we can say when there's enough, we can say when there's not enough, we can make those, and we can learn to be malleable and pliable and not get too close, but learning the balance. Everything is the balance. That's the word I'd like you to leave with today, is the balance between independence and connectedness, between all of that. Life is about balance, for sure. To stay present in the midst of uncertainty is a great art. Having a vision of where we want to go is a great art. There's a brief poem I read, not from any poet we know, I don't think, but it's about every generation faces inherited conflicts. We've been through tough times before. It's vital to see with a fresh perspective. And here's a poem by Eugene Ruggles. And he dreams, this is what he dreams, this is his vision. I have no enemies left. I have no enemies left. Only friends who are late. Only friends who are late. Come in. There is no lock. Hang your coat beside the fire and pull up a chair to its edge. We shall drink tea and clear the path, leading back to the heart's first address, which is love. And when we love each other, band, Kirk. I'll try that line again.
What power you have.
I need you guys, that's in girls, yes. And when we love each other, we can have the time of our lives.